Okay, also, looking at week 3, we see we've got the interest survey coming up on Sunday, and it's due, the summary. Then the following week, next week in class, you will need to have your planning commentary ready for someone else to give you feedback on it. And those are the 2 big assignments coming up. Okay, tonight we're going to be looking at task 3 in some big detail. And just so you know, I am recording through the ceiling mics. And let me get my clicker out. I did not run off any materials for this. Instead, you have the PowerPoint on your week 3. So if you can open the PowerPoint and open it up on your computer, you could actually take notes there if you wanted to. Go to notes. All right, in going through task 3, I went through task 3, making good choices, and task 3 handbook. I just chose a handbook randomly. And I went through and created this 9-step process that gets you through task 3. So the first thing you're going to do is to select an assessment. Then you're going to establish your evaluation criteria. You're going to collect and analyze student work. Select 3 work samples. Document feedback. Plan for students' understanding and use of feedback. This thing's about to go. Provide evidence of academic language use.
Yep.
Respond to assessment commentary prompts, and then, of course, the assessment that you chose is attached to the end of the assessment commentary. So let's talk about what kind of assessment you need. First of all, you're to choose one assessment that's given to the whole class. Now, one of your condition codes says that it has to be given to the whole class, and if it's not, you get a condition code. And some people take that way too literally. If, for instance, you give an assessment and you've got 20 kids and 2 of them are absent, no one's going to be going through and counting your students. So it does not really matter if you don't have the data for people who were absent. So don't worry about that. What that condition code is about is making sure that people don't just pull out a subset of students and just give them a test. This assessment needs to reflect each student's individual work, and it cannot be the work of pairs or groups of students. That's important. And because the task focuses on your ability to analyze work, peer assessments and self-assessments don't work for this. That's important. I've had this question already. Can I use peer assessment or self-assessment? No, because the whole point of this is for you to show that you can analyze work and assess and analyze the assessments. You're going to then select 3 student work samples to get a more detailed analysis. And the work sample, you have to have the actual work sample. So a checklist is not a work sample. So this happens a lot in PE. And I can see it being something in kindergarten. Say that you were going to evaluate the student's ability to tie their shoes. And I don't think you all do that in kindergarten anymore, but that used to be a thing. Back in the old days, that was a skill. You taught them how to tie their shoes. And there was a check, you would check it off. Well, if that were the skill you were teaching, then you would have the steps and you would check them off. But that doesn't count as an assessment. That's your tool for evaluation criteria, but it's not the assessment. The assessment would be a videotape of the kid tying their shoes. That would be the work sample is what I'm saying. The work sample is not the checklist. So this happens a lot in PE. PE, they want to give me a checklist as a work sample, but it's not. It's documentation, but it's not a work sample. So with kindergarten, make sure you're getting a work sample. It may probably going to have to be a video. All right, so you can use video clips, audio files, photographs, and other media. Probably not photographs for you all. Photographs is mainly for art, visual arts. Your handbook gives you the details you need. So in your handbook right now, I want you to go to your evidence chart for task 3. It should be in the front of your notebook. So go to your evidence chart for task 3. And Emily, are you literacy or math? Literacy. Read for us, just answer yes or no. Can you submit a document as an assessment?
Yes.
Oh, as a work sample? Yes. Can you submit an audio file as a work sample?
Yes.
Can you submit a video file? Yes. Math. Is yours the same way? Who's got math? Yes, it is. So you have these choices, but those are the choices. Now sometimes I get people who get to the academic language part and they'll say, well, how about this work sample for academic language? No. You have only one set of work samples, and that work sample is with the assessment, period. Now, the work sample you choose could be used for both the assessment and the language, but you don't get to have a whole other set of files for academic language. One assessment. Now this is important. It's got to be part of your central focus, and it needs to be aligned with one or more of your stated objectives. The assessment can be formal. It can't be informal. It says that it can be informal. There's no way, if you're taking documentation on it, that it's going to be informal. So don't pay attention to that somebody wrote that wasn't thinking with their brain. So it can be formal and formative or summative. So it doesn't have to be something that happens at the end. It can be something that happens in the middle. But it needs to result in evidence according to the evaluation criteria that you choose. And we're going to talk about that. And you need to be looking for something that's going to give your students an opportunity to really show their thinking. For example, open-ended questions. True, false? No. Matching? No. Fill in the blank? No. But open-ended questions work well. Writing samples, performance tasks, projects, problem sets, lab reports, other complex assignments. Yes?
So is it okay if like the first 2 or 3 questions are like true and false, and then they have like 6 to like 8 short answer? That's fine.
It can be. It can be mixed.
It's mixed.
But what you want to do is that you want to have an assessment that you're going to be able to give feedback on besides just, well, you got the answer wrong. Yeah. So the higher up in blooms you go, the better. Now, establishing the evaluation criteria. I found this definition for evaluation criteria. Where do you think I found it? In the glossary, which is where? Where? In your handbook. Yes. So oftentimes, when I get questions, and I'm not saying don't ask me questions, but a lot of the times you all worry and stress over stuff that you could look up yourself. It's in the handbook. Almost every bit of it's in the handbook. So look it up. So evaluation criteria is right there in the handbook. Now, whether or not it's a good definition is a whole nother subject. Sometimes I can read these definitions and I'm just as confused as I was before I read it. But this is how you're going to assess the evidence of student learning. What are the qualities of the performance that you want to see? So for instance, how do you decide if you're going to give full credit or partial credit? How are you going to decide if this person is proficient or advanced or above proficient or needs improvement? Rubrics are perfect examples of evaluation criteria. But they can also be checklists. Checklists are also good. But this is the thing you need to remember. Your evaluation criteria must align with your objectives. Must. And so you need to actually put what objectives you're assessing. You're going to see some samples here in a minute, and you're going to see how these folks actually put their objectives into their evaluation criteria document. You want to make sure that you can measure the outcome of the learning segment, and, oh, there's that subject-specific emphasis again. It's not going away. So one of the things that your handbook, prompt 1 of task 3, forgets to ask you to analyze your assessment based on SSE. But if you don't do that, and that's why it's in my outline that I give you, if you don't do that, then you can't answer the last question, which is about the SSE. So that's why it's in the outline but not in the question. And here it is. Address the elements of the SSE as defined in your handbook. And everybody by now should know what their SSE are. There's subject-specific emphasis. Okay, so this is a middle grade science one. And this is rubric 15, and this is what I'm talking about. In order to do well on rubric 15, you have got to talk about where you're going in instruction based on your SSE. They're in everybody's rubric 15. So look at your rubric 15. You can't talk about how your students did in the SSE unless your assessment assesses that. That's my point. As you're making your assessment, you've got to consider the SSE. Now, rubric 15 would be part of your handbook. It's in the handbook. Look in your handbook, not the URL. The URL just gives an explanation of the rubric. You need to open your handbook. It's going to be in task 3 is where you'll see it. What page is it for math?
36. 36.
36 for math, and what page is it for literacy?
35.
35. So rubric 15. And you'll notice level 4, they list the SSE. And this is why people aren't doing well on rubric 15. And it drives me nuts. So I go over this every year. This year, by golly, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. I know it. I can feel it. I can feel it. Hit you. It's in the air. Rubric 15. We're going to slay it. 5. Crazy on rubric 15. Okay. There's that room. There it is. You need to. SSE is in rubric 15, and you have to keep that in mind at the beginning of task 3. You're still not away from that. The SSE is the foundation of the entire EdTPA. So you've got to make sure that you're assessing it. How much you assess depends on what your rubric 15 says. Because what does yours say, math? Does it say conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and mathematical reasoning, or is there an or?
And or.
Is it and or? Okay. So that's why you need to know that now, because your assessment needs to assess and or. Okay? And then with the literacy strategy, it's just going to be your literacy strategy and related skills that you've been talking about all along. So make sure that's what you're assessing. Here's some examples of evaluation criteria. Now this is in a separate file. It goes into task 3, but you'll notice that I'm having you do it pretty soon, because you have to know what your assessment's going to be, and you have to have an evaluation criteria really before you can get started on task 3. They don't have the steps in there in a very good linear way. They've got them out of order, I think. So, objective. Notice how this person has put the objectives. Here's a good math one. To compare numbers by using symbols greater than, less than, equal to, and then they've come up with examples of what would be non-satisfactory, satisfactory, and mastery. This is a very simple evaluation criteria, but as you can see, it is aligned with the objectives. What is not on there? Did the student write their name? What is not on there? Is their work neat? Why aren't those things there?
They don't matter.
Well, they matter, but they don't what?
Count. Measure the objective.
They don't measure the objective. That's what you're thinking. Yeah, they don't measure the objective. And so you can make all the comments you want to about whether or not their work is neat or whether or not they have their numbers lined up properly. But unless it has something to do with the objective, it doesn't count as feedback. And it should not be part of your evaluation criteria. Here's another one. This is a literacy one. And this person has chosen 5-part rubric. Evidence from text. Evidence supports the topic sentence. Mastery, above proficient, proficient, near proficient, and below proficient, of how she's set it aside. So we don't have excellent down to sucks. We can use words like proficient. You all, where's your sense of humor? You can't be that tired. Below proficient. So these are some terms that you can use that sound a lot better than you are a screw-up. You don't want to do that. Okay. Now here's this person. This person I'm going to show you next. This girl must have spent like 60 hours just making her evaluation criteria. But just because it's so wonderful, I'm going to show it to you. This was a middle grades science person, and what she's done is that she's even come up with the percentage as to what's mastery, approaching the objective, and below. She's talked about what the answer is for each of these. She's put conceptual understanding as the SSE. She's identified that. Through here, she's got short answer. She's got a rubric just for that one answer, a rubric just for these 2 answers, and then for just these 2. She's got the objectives with each of them. Yeah, I was impressed. That's pretty good. That's better than I could do. So that was pretty amazing. That's not necessary. It's very good, but it's not necessary. Having something like this is perfectly fine. This person got the same points as this person because of the explanation and because of the alignment and because of the rubric. Yes?
So we were just wondering, so this is our feedback, correct? Like this is our, so like instead.
This is going to guide your feedback.
Okay, this is going to guide our feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So say we make one of these and that guides our feedback that we give to them in our video clip, in our 5-minute like video. So would we would submit this also with the video?
This evaluation criteria, you would submit a blank one.
Yes.
So you're going to submit a work sample. You submit 3 work samples.
Yeah.
One for student 1, student 2, student 3, and 3 feedback files. Now, if you wanted to submit one of these as a feedback file, you could do that. But you cannot submit more than 6 files. 6 is going to be it. And 3 of them work samples, 3 of them feedback.
Yep. Okay. And the 3 feedback files can be video, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The reason it's broken up into parts is because I've been recording this, and you see that in D2L. I've been recording these on my bed. Sitting on my bed. All right, so analyzing the assessment. So we've talked about the assessment, evaluation criteria. Now let's talk about collecting and analyzing student work. Patterns of learning. You want, after you have given the assessment, now you're going to go through all of the assessments, and you're going to study the assessments, and you're going to figure out what? Learning trends, patterns of learning. How many patterns of learning do you need? 3 patterns of learning. You need to find 3 patterns of learning. It does not say that in there. I'm telling it to you because that's my experience. And if you look at making the choices, it suggests what I suggest, that you find your learning trend. So you've got learning trend 1, learning trend 2, learning trend 3. So let's say this is what everybody seemed to do well on. Then you find one good example from your work sample, and that's going to be focus student 1. The second learning trend, maybe that's something that everybody missed. You're going to find one work sample for that, and that's going to be focus student 2. And then learning trend 3 might be a common error that you kept seeing. That's going to be focus student 3. I know what your handbook says, that one of the focus students must be a student with special needs. However, if you look at the condition codes and the rubrics, you will see that having that or not having that makes no difference in your score. It's more of a suggestion than a rule. They are suggesting that you have one of them be a special needs student because they feel that gives you more to talk about. And it's true. And if possible, I would have one of those focus students be a special needs student. But it's not critical. It's not a big deal if you can't. So, what is a pattern of learning? These are consistencies that you'll see within or among different groups of students and individuals. You're going to look for quantitative patterns. So as you go through looking at the test, you're going to create a graph that shows the results. How they did on Objective 1, how they did on Objective 2, or how they did in the different evaluation criteria that you came up with. Then you'll have qualitative patterns. So once we've decided like 85% of the class can add 2 one-digit numbers, then we're going to find an example of a work sample where that shows it qualitatively. You're going to examine data performance from the whole class with more detailed examination of the 3 focus students' work samples. Quantitative would be the graph that you're going to make. Qualitative is your analysis of the actual work samples. And then you're going to go into a discussion of 3 patterns of learning. What did most of them understand? What were common errors or partial understandings? What, if anything, did students succeed? So all thinking about, okay, all these students did great. What did those students who did great, what did they have anything in common? Were all of them like strong readers? So it could be that you can find some commonalities among the students who had these patterns. In your analysis, be sure to address all of your evaluation criteria, and there it is again, they don't mention it, but they should, subject-specific elements of your handbook, the subject-specific emphasis. And that's rubric 11. Rubric 11 is going to score by looking at your assessment, which you'll have at the end of the assessment commentary. It'll look at the score will look at your evaluation criteria, and the score will look at your answer to prompt 1. You want your analysis to show what students did right and wrong. You want to give specific examples from the work sample. So you actually quote. As you can see on Focus B's video, he says blank. So you actually quote from the video or from the work sample. Patterns of learning you want to describe patterns of learning for the whole class. To get a 5, you're going to demonstrate connections between quantitative and qualitative patterns of learning. So, this is what one student did. So like I said, you've got to make a chart. And the chart's got to be in the assessment commentary. So it says, like in prompt 1B, I think, to include a graph or a narrative about how your students did. Don't do a narrative. It'll bore the pants off your score. We don't want our scorers to be bored, because then they'll go through things too fast. So this student did objective 1, talked about and gave a narrative, and she gave quantitative data. This student I had never seen it done this way, and I thought this was really good. This person used, and if you don't know how to do this, people can help you, people like Ethan. He's good at making these types of things, but you can do actually this from Excel, Word, PowerPoint, but you can put your data into a chart and then come out with these beautiful graphs, whatever you choose. So this person used a graph, and then she gave a small explanation, which I think is a good approach. And here's her second one that she did. She had 2 graphs. This person had a different approach altogether. She did a chart. I don't really like these because you can't just look at it like you can here and see, boom, what's the 50? 50% was near proficient, right? So it's not a boom. But this is fine. It's just not quite as, doesn't stand out like this. What I do like about this is that she clearly talks about the objective up here and there. And she's highlighted the focus students. Here's another one. This person also did 2. She put them side by side. Objective 1, objective 2. Okay. So far we've talked about the assessment, evaluation criteria, about student work, and how to analyze the student work and the assessment. Let's talk about the work samples and feedback. So you're going to choose 3 work samples. After you have gone through the whole class data, you're going to find how many patterns of learning? 3. And you're going to choose 3 samples from students that illustrate those patterns of learning. You think about maybe understandings, misunderstandings, patterns of errors that you see. If you're providing a video work sample, you are going to have to anticipate who your focus students are going to be. for example, what I would do is that I would say, I'm pretty sure, because I know my class, that my focus students are, I'm probably going to choose a focus student that's high, medium, and low. And that's very likely what you might do. But I wouldn't just video 3 of them. Instead, I might video 6 and then choose the best 3 videos. So you do have to do, if you're going to use video evidence for your work sample, you do have to plan ahead a little bit. You want to make sure that you consult your handbook carefully and make sure that you are, following the evidence chart. Your evidence chart does tell you that you can use written work, audio work, video work, but look here. What is the minimum number of files you can have? What's the maximum number of files you have? So how many files must you have for work samples?
3.
Not 4 and not 2. 4 or 2 will give you a condition code. So you must have 3, no more than 3. And you can have, but look, it's no page limit on the work sample. So if a person's got pages, this doesn't really apply usually to elementary, but it does for high school sometimes. If they've got several pages in their work sample, it's still one work sample. But you can't put a bunch of students on one work sample, just one student per work sample. You'll want to take correction fluid or a piece of paper or something, a marker, to mark out their name. And what a lot of people do is that they take a piece of paper that says Focus Student A and they lay it on top of what the student's paper is, where they wrote their name. And then they scan it that way. And you really, a lot of people want to use a picture, but I don't, picture files aren't supported. It's got to be a PDF, a doc, ODT. What's ODT, Ethan? Do you know?
No idea.
Anybody else know what ODT is? So the file type, you can't, it doesn't support a picture. So in this case, you can't take a picture of the work sample. If you were an art teacher, you could, but you can't. Okay. On the work sample, indicate the student number. So on the work sample, you're going to put student 1, student 2. And okay, if you have need to transcribe, that's what this bottom bullet's about. Let's say your video, if you can't hear what the student is saying, you can either attach a transcription of the inaudible comments, no more than 2 pages, to the end of the assessment commentary. Or you can embed the quotes with timestamps into the commentary response, or you can put captions on the video. I think the best one is to embed quotes where you need them into the commentary response. So as you're writing and you're wanting to quote what the student said, you just put it right there. That way the score doesn't have to go back and forth looking from one thing to another. It's just right there in front of her. Okay, you need to document your feedback. Let's talk about what document is not. Feedback is not checks, it's not X's, it's not points, it's not grades, it's not smiley faces, it's not emojis, it's not praise. That's not feedback. Those have to do with grades and praise. That's not feedback. Feedback is specific, it's helpful, it's practical, and it's relevant to objectives. And your feedback needs to include strengths, needs, and strategy. So you're going to have clear and specific information related to the lesson objectives. It can be written on the work samples or provided orally within the video of the work sample. So PE is a great example of this. So PE, they're doing a bowling stance and they're talking through, and as they're doing this motion, the PE instructor gives them feedback at that point. If you're doing a performance like that, and if you're giving them feedback, then your feedback is on the video with the work sample, that's fine. Or you can have a separate feedback file, and the feedback can be written, and it can be or audio or video, but make sure it is age appropriate. You don't give written feedback to kids that can't read the feedback. All right? That'll get you a 1. Make sure that you give feedback related to the, related to the objectives and the SSE. That's important.
So let's say like I'm doing a writing sample, and can I say something even if my like can I say, hey, you need to put a period at the end of your sentence even though it's not related to writing?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
But it's not evidence of feedback that you're going to use in your commentary.
No, but I would just say it because
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
I would say. Okay.
And likewise, you can make comments on their papers about things that aren't related to your objectives. It's just, it's not going to be evidence that goes in your benefit. It's not going to be evidence that's going to go to show that you did the things that you needed to do. Strengths, needs, strategies. Again, feedback. Look at your assessment task 3 evidence chart, or part B, evidence of feedback. What is the minimum number of files for feedback files? 0. That's because you don't have to have feedback files, because your feedback could be where?
On the work sample.
On the work sample. So it is possible that you will have no feedback files. What's the maximum? 4. But this is where it gets tricky, because that 4 has nothing to do, that's not a 4th feedback file, that's actually a file for academic language, which we'll get to later. So don't let that trick you. You can have 3 feedback files or 0. 3 or 0, not 1 or 2. Well, I guess you could have 1 or 2, but it would be confusing for the scorer if you're giving some of the students feedback written and some of the students feedback on video. Only 1 file for each focus student, a document, video, or audio file. Label the file with the student's number, student 1 video feedback, student 2 feedback, etc. If more than 1 focus student appears in the video or audio clip, then you upload that video twice, and then you label one student 1 and label the other one student 2. That way you still have the right number of video files. Again, if you cannot hear the feedback, then you can transcribe it and put it at the end of your assessment commentary or embed it in your prompt, that sort of thing. Here's rubric 12. Rubric 12 is on feedback. So you want your feedback to be specific for needs or strengths related to learning objectives. That gets you a 3. That's pretty easy. And you don't get a 3 on here, you really just deserve to go back to kindergarten. Because it's bad. If you can't give feedback related to their strengths or needs, then what were you doing? So feedback should be, to get a 4, feedback is specific and addresses both strengths and needs related to the learning objective. But to get a 5, which everybody should be able to get on this rubric, then you're going to talk about strengths, needs, and provide a strategy. And it's easier to do than you would think, because you only have to provide that strategy on 1 student. That's what's in the URL. So that strategy does not have to be for all 3 focus students, just for 1. Here is my suggestion for the perfect format for making feedback. So if I was doing this with a video, I would go ahead and script this out for myself. And then I would talk to the student about remind them what the evaluation criteria was, and strengths, the needs, and give them a strategy for improvement. You can also handwrite this on the back of people's papers. We'll do it. We'll do it. Okay, so these can be handwritten on the back of your student work samples. So you can give all your scribble wibble on the front of the work sample, and on the back turn it over and write this. That's what a lot of the students do in secondary. What you have to be careful of course, is age-appropriate feedback. So doing this part gets you a 3 or a 4. If you talk about the objectives and strengths and needs, you're going to get a 3 or a 4. But if you talk about the objectives, strengths and needs, and add a strategy, you'll have 5. So this is one rubric I think is very easy to make a 5 on, because you can plan for it. Yes?
So just to clarify, if we write it on the back where you can't see their assessment anymore, so we would put that in a different file. But if it was on the front where you can see both the assessment and the feedback, we just put that.
So your file can be more than one page. So you would scan the front and the back of the paper into one file, and it would just go on one file.
Okay.
Or you could do it separately as a video file. As a feedback file. Now, remember I showed you that somebody who had all that elaborate evaluation criteria. Well, here's a rubric. Here's the student work sample. You can see where they've written in purple. And that's important. If you're giving student, it's not as important for you all, let's get real. But when you've got high school students and college students, and the score is trying to figure out whose handwriting is whose, then it's hard to tell. So I tell them to use a different color pen. So that's important. And then you can see there, lots of feedback. But just to make sure, this person not only put feedback on their work sample, they also made a feedback file that included the rubric that she highlighted, and then at the bottom she wrote feedback summary, and then she wrote those things. So she didn't just include the feedback that was written on the work sample, she also included this feedback file, making it super easy for her scorer to see she had scored a 5. Okay. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about understanding and using feedback. And Ethan, when we come back, pass these out. When we come back.
It's a lot. It's not about what I need to see for my but she needs ways to improve the experience. Don't correct it that day, so that I can download the files that I want, and then go to the next day, if she wants to have them corrected. Okay, because I need the ones that are done.
That's right. Yes.
And I'm just gonna drop
I don't think there's anything that's any more powerful than a video of you sitting and talking to them. And it can be just you, if you can figure out a time, a downtime where you can take students out, set up the camera, and videotape them. And it doesn't have to be, it could be later, closer to the time. And just pull out this work and say, remember that we did this, and I want to talk to you about this.
It's 2 days.
So I have a question, right? For like trains, like my students are riding like kind of on like a single event. So like one of the learning trends is like how to ride. If they don't know how.
So learn trend, you can object. You don't know your trends until you're learning trends.
I've already done that. I've already looked at that. So like when I was like, some students really don't know how to ride. So can I use
Is that what your objective is?
being able to, like the overall for the summer assessment is I can write what your simple movement, what your literacy strategy. I typed out where I struggled with that. It was just like I can identify the beginning, middle, end of the story in order to like
So does that fit with that trend, fit with that strategy?
It's like right where I see the story.
So that's not what, you're not assessing their life. You're assessing their ability to identify the beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, like in the first lesson, and then it goes in like, then we start working on like writing their own single event.
So what's the strategy?
Like I haven't, like, the strategy like,
See, there's one thing I want to do. You just need to make sure that what you talk about that it is part of your strategy that you're teaching. If it's not, if it's something else.
my second and third lesson was all about like being able to identify a big idea in a small moment, and then taking that small moment and writing about it, like what happened in the beginning, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end, and that created their several events. So I couldn't really use out to going against like because I talk about them writing about their small moment.
When you start talking about complete sentences, that's a whole nother different thing.
Like the strengths and needs, because I always do.
Better know it now.
Yeah, strengths and needs thing.
And then like erasing together.
It's like a whole another
But yeah, I just did that for Monday, so when I came home and did that,
Do you have that sheet? Do you have that sheet? I'm pretty sure I have it in here.
Like she's making the lesson.
Is that what you needed? Yeah. Like, but I would only.
I would now maybe had it next Tuesday at 3:10. So hopefully I would be done about this time, but I was going to let you know maybe a few minutes. And I had tons of questions. And that would be not if we put our say something for our material file, like 5, 10, and I have
Thursdays, I'm like, yes,
assessment. After that,
well, for the year, but then after that,
what is it? It's like the IFDI test cards. They like read them and it's like, they're doing things 10 blocks, so it's like I have their quick thing and I have to figure out what number.
So, I think sometimes it has to be, it's often not even important. So if you need that to demonstrate that you have varied types of assessments,
like I have
so,
and she stutters.
yeah.
So she is, or it should be just like, so I might just do this.
No, she's learning.
So I'm, okay. Okay, so I'll start like, we do need like grades and first and then through it examples with like symbols would be like impacts, but then like communicating, like they'll read it as if it's greater than using sentences. So which one? So okay, even though there's some syntax symbols, position.
What you're doing like I said.
Yeah.
And you're clearly doing this.
Okay. Now it was good. So that put in
You're going to describe one language task. That's the one. Whatever you choose. So don't worry about individual lesson plans.
and then like asking movie and like
I should know you did like watching other teachers and I'm like, I didn't know like
They used to require that you go watch other teachers, and now you want to.
so would we do that like now? Okay.
I'll get time, y'all can get time.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I would get it okay with them. Really, everyone. I know.
That may be a good time to do.
So what you did is different than what you wrote. So that is okay. There's a, they address that. One of the things that you reflect on is that you realize that you that you had cases of the issue that you hadn't expected, and so you did this. So that comes in the last part of the task on the teacher. It's actually a different part. So they're talking about.
Did you get rid of my
So just bring that up. Okay, let's get started back. It's a lot to cover tonight, but I think it's important that we get the dirty details about this task 3. So that you just, once you get a chance to, you might discover that you've not thought of something, or you've still got plenty of time to make corrections and fix things, right? Okay. One of the things that you have to do after, and this is just something to be mulling around about right now. Once you've given feedback to students, how do you make sure they understand the feedback and use it? Let me tell you, I've been teaching at the college level now for, this is my 6th year. And one of the biggest surprises to me was how I could give detailed feedback to college students, graduate students, and they wouldn't read it. And so I would pull up their lesson plans, and I would type all these comments on their lesson plans, and then I would give them a grade, and I would submit the feedback, and then nothing would happen. They would submit another lesson plan, and the exact same mistakes would be made. Because the only thing that the student was interested in was the grade. So I stopped giving grades. I gave grades, but you have a 0 until you have looked at the feedback and rewritten it using my feedback. That's now my new rule. Makes nothing to help my popularity any, but they read the feedback. So now, in order to get any grade above a 0, you have to open the lesson plan, read my feedback, and use it. That way I ensure that my students are reading the feedback, understanding the feedback, and using the feedback. Feedback is very, very strongly correlated with strong learning. Feedback, the use of feedback, the understanding of feedback, and the opportunity to use it. Because if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. If you do something wrong, and somebody comes in and they say, well, you didn't do that right, and you never get a chance to do it the right way, then you're never going to learn how to do it the right way. And so it's important that you give people a chance, students a chance to use feedback. So they have, and historically, this is associated with rubric 13, and historically, it is our lowest performing rubric. And I have 2 theories about that, because it's an easy question to answer. Everybody look at rubric 13. It's an easy question to answer. And it's from 2C in prompt, in task 3, it's 2C. So sad, but I know that. But it is a question that says, how are you going to support students in understanding and using feedback? Well, 2 things happen. First of all, it's in 2C. Most of our students don't realize, they think, oh, it's just one little part. It doesn't occur to them that an entire rubric comes from that one little part, until somebody tells them. And if you're using my outlines, then you know that you're supposed to write a lot there. But some people don't do that. They skip that. Oh, by the way, before I forget it again, Dr. Keith wants you to take these to your school and hang them somewhere. Please do that. Okay. All right. So the other thing is that I think people they don't score high enough because they've not thought about how to organize their answer in a way that the scorer can see what they're trying to say. And so it just gets to be a mess. There's not a whole lot of different ways to make sure students understand your feedback. I mean, what can you do? Well, the most obvious thing is to sit down and talk to them about it, right? Go over it in class, have them do error analysis themselves, do a think, pair, share with their work. There's not a ton of different ideas. So this is not a place where you have to worry about your creativity, because they're not really expecting that. And as far as using feedback, well, the most common way to have students use feedback is to do the same work over or something very similar using your feedback. The problem comes in here. If you look at the question, it says, how will you support students when they're understanding and using feedback? Which means you can't give it to them for homework because you're not going home with them. So this has to be something that happens in the classroom. Good news is, this answer to this question is written in future tense. You are writing about what you plan to do, and you never need to provide any documentation that it occurs. So what you're doing is that you're describing what would happen in a perfect world if you had the time and the resources to give everybody one-on-one conference about their work and sit down with them and help them figure out how to use their feedback, okay? So we're not necessarily talking about something that's going to be practical for you to carry out. This again is a question that is they're going to use to assess your knowledge of applying best practices, not your opportunity to apply best practices. Because I know when I was teaching, I knew what best practice was. I also knew I didn't always get a chance to have best practice in my classroom because of other things that got in the way. Okay, so your explanation should demonstrate that you have considered how and when students might best apply the feedback or support. Maybe there's going to be opportunities in the next lessons coming up. Maybe you're going to have them revise the work sample, but it has to be about how you're going to support them. This is the rubric 13 that everybody does so badly on. For level 3, the candidate describes how the focused students will understand or use feedback. So you're just describing, but this is where a lot of people, why they don't get a 3 on this, is because you have to talk about how all 3 focused students are going to do it. Okay? And they maybe talk about 1. They just don't pay enough attention to answering this question. Level 4, describe how you are going to support students in understanding and using their feedback. And now they throw in something else, using their feedback as it's related to their strengths or their weaknesses. And then level 5, how you're going to support the students in understanding and using feedback and strengths and weaknesses. I've never seen a 5 on this. Yes, I did. I did see a 5. I saw a 5 last year. I think I've got it up here as an example. Now this is the thinking organizer that has been put out there for you. Here you can think about how your focused student, thinking about how they will understand, and then how you're going to support them. How they're going to understand and use, how you're going to support. I don't think this actually is good enough. This might could get you a 2 or a 3. Might get you a 3, but it's not going to be good enough for a 4 or a 5. So I'm suggesting that you do something else. What is it? Well, I'm using a PowerPoint that is obviously it's not the newest version, but let me show you what you can draw this. Think about a focused student. I have to go back and find that. Focus student 1, okay? And you want to talk about strengths. Nope, wait a minute. How they're going to understand feedback, how they're going to use feedback, how they're going to understand feedback in relation to strengths, how they're going to understand feedback in relation to needs, how they're going to use it in relation to strengths, and how they're going to use it in relation to needs. Let me just pull out of here a second, because I'm not crazy. Exactly. Crazy. Get back to you on what that costs. Okay. My boyfriend says, "You just there it is." So it's on the PowerPoint. Apparently, this isn't the newest version of it that I've got pulled up. The newest version's on the other computer, but that's what it looks like. If you use that, then that's what's going to make the difference. This right here is what you're wanting to make. So let's just listen to what I have to say here.
I'm suggesting you take each student, student 1, and talk about how you're going to help them understand their strengths, how are you going to help them understand their needs. So in one paragraph, you would write about student 1, how they understand their strengths, how they understand their needs. Then student 1, how they're going to use their strengths and their needs. So helping them understand their strengths and then their needs, and then how they might possibly use their strengths to overcome their needs might be a really good.
How can they use their strengths to overcome their needs? If you can make that, I think you got it.
Approach.
Okay.
Here's an example.
I really don't like listening to myself. I really don't. But my boyfriend, he gets tickled at it. He loves it. He loves to hear my videos. I think you're a really sad person. You're a really sad person. That's got to be true love. He says, "You got such a sweet little voice, and you sound so positive." And I listen to my voice and I think, "Oh my God, this is not sweet." Okay, so here is, when we talk about understanding feedback, that means that the candidate reviews work. These are examples. This is examples. Candidate reviews work with whole class, focusing on common mistakes that explicitly includes content that one or more focused students were given feedback on. So if, for instance, your plan is to go, just go over it with the whole class, that's an example of helping them understand feedback. Example of using the feedback is asking the focus students to revise work using feedback and then resubmit the revised work. Now, that's not a level 4. Why not? They're describing a level 3 here. Why isn't it a level 4? Read level 4. What does it say? Here in level 3, the candidate describes how the focus students are going to do it. But level 4, you describe how you're going to support them. And this is a 3 but not a 4. Because you reviewing it with them in front of the class is not a support. And having them do it in their own time to go through and fix their work and revise it, that's not a support. That's a level 3. Now here it says how to go from a 3 to a 4. At a 4, candidate may work with focus students in a small group and reteach several concepts they struggled with on their assessment, using a graphic organizer to further develop understanding of each concept, such as a T-chart or concept map. Next, students would be given an opportunity to revise their responses involving those concepts, using graphic organizer to support their revisions. And so that's an example of a 4. Notice that there was a lot of talk of supports, graphic organizers. Level 5, here's what they say is a level 5. Students are to review feedback when I return homework sheets and are to look for the steps given to solve the empirical formula problems in their notes. Student A represents the group of students who mastered setting up the conversions from grams to moles, but who will need practice adding up molecular masses for molecules that have parentheses in the formula, and I have no idea what that says. And so I will write 5 similar formulas on the smartboard, and so you can see how detailed it is. It's not just, I'm going to give this, let them take it home and revise it, right? Now look at this. Oh, shoot, darn it. You see that whole section is missing from this. I got to fix that for tomorrow. All right, but fortunately, I have video to it. So we'll go back to my video, because I want you to see this example of this girl's level 5.
What one of my students from 2017. So look how much. So this is one of the problems, is that people don't write enough of this. And this person, she did not worry herself with how much she wrote. As long as she wrote the page limits, and she did. But she had a paragraph for Focus Student 1, paragraph for Focus Students 2, and all through, I didn't highlight the whole thing, but all through she's talking about what they did well on, what they struggled, supporting them in their understanding of feedback, supporting them in using the feedback. So she uses those words from the rubrics. And
that's important. She says, I will support students. I will support students. Because those words are in the rubric and they're bolded. That means they're important.
Makes it real strong. So this brings, okay.
Me and my Google videos. I'm going to become an internet sensation. All these people across the country are going to be looking at my videos. Right there, TBA. Okay. Let's talk about all right, you need to provide evidence of academic language use. You can do 1, 2, or all of these. You just can't do none of them. 1, 2, or all. So you can refer to, if you think that your academic language is shown well in the 2 video clips that you've already selected for instruction task 2, then fine. You can just refer to those. Or you can have an additional video of language use, but it can be no more than 5 minutes. And that's where that 4th file comes in for feedback file. So you've got 3 feedback files. You will actually submit the language use file into a little space in that feedback thing. You'll see on upload day. It'll make sense. But that's why they say it's a 4th file is possible. Or you can use work samples from task 3. So this would be your work samples that you've already chosen, not different ones. So somebody asked me, they said, well, can I have a language work sample? No, because that would be in addition to the work sample that you've already got. So you can't have more work samples. You can have a language video, but you can't have 3 more work sample files. Do you understand? So this is a file that's a 4th file. What I would do is that, if possible, then you want to make sure that you have an opportunity where you are really having students use their function use their discourse, use their vocabulary, try to catch it on video. If not, it might be, if you're doing writing assignment, then that's very clearly going to be academic language. You might be able to use your argument there. But you just want to make sure that you're showing enough that you can score well. For the task 3, it's a video clip. It can be a video, but no more than 5 minutes. If you choose to submit a video clip of student academic and student language use, it should be no more than 5 minutes. You may identify a portion of the clip provided for instruction task 2 or submit an entirely new clip. But this is from the question. This is the question that you're answering. Explain and provide concrete examples for the extent to which your students were able to use or struggled to use the selected language function, vocabulary and/or symbols, and syntax or discourse to develop content understandings. So, and they're wanting to see all 3 in your sample. And that's where it gets hard. Yes?
Oh, so I have a question. So
Yeah.
my strategy was to interpret character responses, and I have it like on video where they're interpreting it, but they don't actually say the words. Like
They don't say interpret?
no.
That's fine.
Okay, so as
You
long
can
as they're
you can
doing
say
it.
you can say, for instance, you can see that they're interpreting because what are they doing?
Okay, so that's what
They
I'm
don't
worried
have
about.
to use the word
Okay.
interpret,
Okay,
and it's not an appropriate word for
yeah.
yeah. So here's the rubric for rubric 14. You need evidence of language function. If you have evidence of just function and vocabulary or discourse or syntax, then that's a 3. But notice function is always listed. If you don't have evidence of function, you can't make a 3. So they don't have to use the interpret, the analyze, but it needs to be, you need to be able to say that the language function was interpret, analyze, whatever you said it was, and then there it is on video or in your work sample. So you have to address the language function, and in order to get a 4, you've got to talk about function, vocabulary, syntax or discourse. To get a 5, and this is pretty cool. So you've got to do function, you've got to show function, vocabulary, discourse or syntax, and talk about how you helped somebody with specific learning needs. Like someone who has trouble with the 4 types of language: reading, writing, speaking, listening.
So how you specifically went to them one-on-one?
Or you gave them a support. How did you support those people when they were doing that task, that language task? And it should be there because that's what you talk about. All of prompt 4 in task 1 is about your general targeted and individual supports.
So for the syntax and discourse, I know for the discourse that's usually their summative assessment.
No,
No.
it's got nothing to do with assessments. It's talking about the language in your lesson. Doesn't have to be an assessment. Doesn't need to be assessment. Probably won't be an assessment. What's messed you up is the term final product. And final product in your brain equals summative. Final product, when we're talking about academic language, has a different meaning. We're talking about the product of the lesson, which could be the language product. So what are they doing with language in that lesson? Are they talking to one another? Are they writing a paragraph? What are they doing with language? And that might not be the assessment. You might not assess it. The the final steps. Wait a minute. Did I have an example for this one? I think I did. No, I don't have that one done yet. Well, okay. I don't know. I think there's another PowerPoint that's going to be uploaded in a few minutes. It's going to have the rest of it. But the final steps of doing the assessment commentary are to upload your assessment. You want to take your assessment, and if you had differentiated copies, but these are blank assessments, or an explanation of the assessment. So if it's not a paper pencil test, then an explanation of the assessment goes at the end of the assessment commentary. It's not a separate file. And this is the thing. When the scorer is scoring task 3, she cannot see your stuff for task 1. So don't think, well, she can look at my assessment file, because she can't. That was submitted with task 1. That's why you have to put the assessment that you're using for this analysis at the end of your assessment commentary. And it does not even need really to be part of your task 1. Okay? It's new evidence that you're submitting with a different task. In your week 3, there's this little thing that says group work. If you open that up, we're going to get in groups, and math people need to get with math people, literacy with literacy, and you're going to talk about these things. You're going to each have an opportunity to discuss your assessment. First of all, don't forget to talk about your assessment. Make sure that you talk about the central focus and the literacy strategy first, so that people know. So talk about how your assessment fits with the objectives, how your assessment fits with the SSE. Talk about your plans or what you're thinking about. Do some brainstorming for evaluation criteria in your groups. Think about your work samples, what your plans are with your work samples, or if you've already done it, what do they look like, and about your plans for feedback. So this is what you're going to do for the rest of the class, and of course until we come back together for closing remarks. So for those of you who are at home watching this, you need to do this with someone else. Talk it through with one of your classmates, call them on the phone or do a video chat and talk about these things. You're not off the hook for this, because this is the thing that will tell me that I know that you've watched all the way through the end of the video, where I give you directions to make sure that you answer these questions in full for those of you who are unable to come Wednesday or Thursday night to make up for Tuesday. If you have questions, those of you who are listening, you can email me to ask me. The rest of you know what to do? Okay. So get in your groups and start discussing these things. And then when you're finished with that, if you have time, you can go ahead and do any other sort of work that seems like it would be important right now, like cleaning up your planning commentary, your lesson plans, your instructional materials, all those things that are coming up due. Okay?
Oh, so I have